spring vegetables are probably some of my most favorite foods, and I really don't need to look for anything special to do with them because I like them plain so well. But today we're going to do something a little bit different than I normally do, and it's going to involve more steps. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's something you can do throughout the summer with a little bit of variation. I'm going to make fresh vegetable lasagna. Now for today we're going to use 3 of the vegetables that come out of the garden early. That would be asparagus, spinach, and green onions. All of these come out early, but the nice thing about this is you could change those vegetables during the summer so that when asparagus is no longer available and you start to have squash or peppers, you can switch out and sort of play with this recipe a little bit. Today, as I said, we're using these, and these are really nice because they are high in certain nutrients that Americans have difficulty getting. Folate is that particular nutrient that we're going to look at. Spinach and asparagus are both good sources, spinach being the better of the two, but both of them being good. Now, you need about 400 micrograms of folate a day, and most Americans get about half that or less, and spinach, a serving of spinach will alone give you about half that, and the recipe that we're making will provide about half of the amount that you need for the day also, because you don't get a full serving of either. So we're using fresh spinach that I've steamed for about 5 minutes, and then I'm adding some shredded carrots, which would be available year-round and be a good source of beta-carotene. There's about a cup of shredded carrots and a half a cup of the green onions, and about 1/4 of a cup of fresh parsley, which you may have growing in your garden or in a window box. And then I've got some red pepper. This is about a half a cup of sliced red pepper. This would not be something that would be available fresh at this time, and so you either need to invest in it or you may have some left in your freezer, which would work just as well. And to that I'm adding about 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. These simply get stirred together. Now, one thing I will tell you about the spinach is that it's not going to stir together well, so that when we actually start layering it in the lasagna, you may have to pull the leaves apart a little bit so that you get it spread out a little bit. We're just going to stir that together a little bit, primarily to get the pepper blended in. All right, we'll go on to the next phase on this one. And we're going to make what normally would be a fairly high fat part of this with a lot of cheese and so on, and we're going to use those ingredients, but we're going to use lower fat versions of them. So I've got a 1.5 cups of low fat or fat-free cottage cheese. We're going to put them in the blender and blend them together. Now, if you use lower fat versions, you often will have something that's a little bit more watery, and so we're going to make some adjustments to that. I've got 1/2 cup of low fat plain yogurt. And then also is going in 1 cup of buttermilk and an egg, which is going to be what's going to help bind it together so that it's not quite as runny. Now, the other thing you need to do to make sure that it doesn't get real runny is part of the reason that I steamed the spinach ahead of time. I wanted to make sure that because it's such a high water vegetable, I collapsed it down and then could squeeze out a lot of the water, and that way the water won't be coming out the sides of the lasagna later on. We're going to blend these just until it's smooth, just until the cottage cheese is no longer lumpy, and then we'll go on from there. Once that's smooth, you don't need to blend it any further than that. You just need to get the lumps of the cottage cheese out so that you don't find them later on in the lasagna. And at this point, we're ready to pretty much put everything together. So what we have is a 9x13 pan and some pre-cooked lasagna noodles. Now, you can do these ahead of time. This is something that takes a fair amount of prep time. I like things that are very quick, like most people like to make when they come home from work and that kind of thing. This is one that's a little bit more elaborate, and you could do this ahead of time in parts, or you could do the whole thing ahead of time, keep it in the refrigerator until you're ready to cook it, or you could cook it and put it in the freezer. So I've got 4 lasagna noodles already cooked in our pan, and to that we're going to add about half of the mixture that we just made with the cottage cheese and the buttermilk. We'll pour that over, so we use about half of that up. And then on top of that, we're going to add the vegetable mixture that we had earlier. And I'm going to go ahead and do it in this way so that I can pull the spinach apart, because I don't want it all in one place, and it will tend, because the leaves collapse, tend to be kind of clumped together. So I want to pull that apart somewhat. I'm going to save some of that spinach for another layer, and then put about half of the vegetables over there as well. Now we have the additional vegetables. Remember, we were going to use some asparagus. I've gone ahead and cooked the asparagus ahead of time. This is steamed again for about 3 to 4 minutes, and I cut it into 1-inch pieces so that it would be easier to use and to serve. We'll sprinkle that over, about half of it. Now during the summertime, you use what vegetables you have available. So summer squash would work well with this. Again, you would want to make sure that you steam it ahead of time and let it drain, because there'll be a lot of liquid come out of that too. Sprinkle on, I've got a cup of sliced mushrooms. Kind of spread them out so they're kind of even. And then you repeat the layers. Again, 4 more noodles or 3 noodles, whichever you will fit your pan. And then repeat the layers again, finishing with, whoops, I also want to put some mozzarella cheese on there. I've got about 2 cups, so we're going to put about a cup of mozzarella on. And then we'll repeat the layers. Once you have the layers put together, remember you're going to end with the noodles on top, and then you use about 1/4 of a cup of Parmesan cheese and shake that over the top. Just so that you get it fairly evenly divided. Now at this point you're going to cover it with foil, or if your pan has a lid, you use that. That goes over the top and it goes in the oven for 30 minutes at 375. Then you uncover it, let it continue to bake for another 20 minutes and let it sit for 10, and it'll be ready to go. When it comes out of the oven, again, let it sit for about 10 minutes so that it will slice a little bit better. But you should be able to see that you retain the natural color because you haven't overcooked anything ahead of time. So most of the vegetables are still real bright, they're real colorful, they're high in nutrients, and they're also going to be real high in taste. It's something a little bit different for summer, takes a little bit more time, but I think once in a while, a little bit of extra time is definitely worth the effort. For Oklahoma Gardening, this is Barbara Brown.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.